Welcome to Light It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah M. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Light It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah M, and today I have a wonderful guest who is joining me here on Light It Up. Chantelle Bittings is a licensed clinical professional counselor who actually has her own practice here in the Chicagoland area, and she is also an author. One of her books is I Am Enough. So I want to welcome Chantelle to Light It Up. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about today.
How are you?
I am doing well. It's a Monday. It's raining, but I'm still good.
Good. So I sort of want to jump right into our conversation today. But I guess we can give folks a little bit of your background. Uh,
hmm
you did complete your undergrad work at the University of Illinois,
Yes.
Urbana-Champaign. Go ahead,
Fighting Illini. Fighting Illini.
go ahead, let's do the ILL.
Yes. I.
So we are rivals in that sense because
I know. I know.
I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago, and of course, as always, wherever you run into you folks from Urbana, that's
Right.
how here's the real U of I.
Right.
Um, so what made you decide your undergrad degree is in psychology,
hmm
correct?
hmm
And then, of course, you pursued you're a national certified counselor here in the state of Illinois. What made you decide to go into the field of psychology? Was this something that you always knew that you wanted to go into the field?
Yes, actually, I know that's strange. People usually don't say yes, but yes, I had an excellent psychology teacher at Whitney Young
Mm-hmm.
office. And so my interest was peaked in high school. And as we went through the course, I was like, yeah, I think I want to kind of do this work. And of course, undergrad is so different from, the work that you do because we have to take so many different classes about everything. But I kind of pushed on through. And then I worked in the field for about a year after undergrad, and that really kind of solidified, number one, I needed a master's degree
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't gonna make enough money as with a bachelor's. And number two, that I wanted to specifically hone in on counseling.
Okay. Awesome. And I'm not gonna let that go that you threw in that Whitney Young Dolphins because just rivals all the way around. But
Right.
it's all love. Love my Mustangs.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. I live with a Mustang every day, so I can take it. I have heard it all.
So you practiced for a year or you worked in the field for a year, and then you obviously had to go on and pursue a master's degree. What made you decide to open your own practice, and how long have you been in practice?
So I've been in practice for the last 12 years now. I was working and doing community mental health work, which is rewarding within itself. I tell people all the time that is the kind of job experience where you get to see everything that you read about in a textbook.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had a really good grasp of kind of working with everyone, every background, nationality, race, gender, everything, every diagnosis. And really, when I began private practice, I started it because the psychiatrist that I was working with at the time was opening a private practice and wanted to have a therapist kind of there already on site for his direct referrals.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of pushed me to come on, let's get it done. You're ready, you can do it. And so I kind of did all my paperwork, got my malpractice insurance. I already had a site because he had, an office space, which is a major hurdle for most clinicians starting up. So that made it easy. And probably a month later, I was full force going forward. And so I did it part time for about 5 years, kind of working full time, doing private practice part time. Just because, it's hard to kind of let go of that every 2 week check and comfortable, like, okay, I could do it. But it finally got to the place after working in agency work and working for different agencies where it's just like, it's time. With all our state of Illinois was downsizing all over the place, closing mental health facilities. And so that kind of uncertainty led me to go ahead and launch out and do private practice full time.
Gotcha. And I know, I mean, like you mentioned, in the state of Illinois, particularly with the closure of different mental health facilities, I know we have certainly seen an increase in the number of people who are impacted, from the lack of facilities that are available. Now in 2020, of course, for the last 6 months or so, really longer than that, but 6 months of where there's been this impact with COVID,
Yes.
we, you know, life is different. And we know that this has a tremendous effect on everyone because of the way, we're not socializing like we used to. We have to communicate, go to school, work online, remote, just the whole 9 yards. And I've thought a lot about, like, wow, what's going to be I guess, the final outcome. I almost look at this, honestly, as a social experiment, because it's, just by the way people are responding to different things. What has been your experience working in the field as far as, um, have you seen an increase in the number of individuals who are seeking out services as a result of, I guess, COVID?
Absolutely. I think I talk about this a lot with some of my therapist friends, that we definitely have seen an uptick in the calls that we get, the inquiries that we get, and even like previous clients returning back, like, okay, I need to definitely have my sessions on a regular basis throughout this whole quarantine pandemic time. And I think that for a lot of us, the stressors of this change of kind of working from home, kids at home, husband at home, everybody at home working from home, trying to figure it out. And then a lot with managing the pandemic. So of course, everything has changed. And also due to like the way so many losses have been coming across our lives recently. And so I was talking with a friend today. It seems like, everyone is grieving. Everyone is in a space where they have lost people close to them. I mean, it's not just one or two, it's a couple of people close to you. Or, every day is somebody else, somebody in the media, somebody in the news, or a family, or a close relative. And so the way we are grieving now is different, not being able to have the big funerals, the big repasts, everyone gathering together to kind of comfort each other and support each other. It's really different.
Mm-hmm.
And just in our cultural experience, how we usually would gather at someone's house and just, hang out, be there for them, bring them food, support them, it's different. And so that combined with just kind of the current climate and the social unrest is just a lot for people to manage right now.
What tips or suggestions, I guess, for people who may not be able to, get the services that they need or reach out to a counselor, or maybe there's a holding pattern, right, before they can actually start their services? What advice or tips would you give those of us who are listening and viewing on what we can do to try to at least try to manage some of the stress or the feelings that we're experiencing right now?
So one of the main things I talk to people about is being self-aware. So I talk a lot about being self-aware, about doing check-ins with yourself just to see where you are, how you're feeling, what is stressing you out, until you can talk to a professional. Because sometimes we feel like it's just everything, like everything's coming at you. You don't know how to pinpoint. So journaling helps. Taking some time to yourself every day, making self care very intentional and purposeful. So I would say, taking 10 to 15 minutes every day just to check in with yourself, to maybe a devotional or meditation, something to help you to calm down for that point in time and really be aware of yourself and how you're feeling.
I'm glad you mentioned journaling, actually,
Mm.
because that's something that I found to be helpful, but I haven't done it in a while. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I know I need to, but when I was doing it, it was very helpful to, like, write down what I was feeling, or what were some of those trigger points, that made me begin to feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you think about grief, I know for myself, the last 2 years has been very, very challenging in terms of dealing with grief. Um, I lost the man that I had been with for 5 years. He passed away suddenly at the age of 43.
Mm.
And then just 9, 10 months later, my father passed away.
Wow.
So the last 2 years have just, you know, been a bit much.
Yeah.
And there are certain triggers. So I am in tune. I've began to be more in tune. Um, and I will tell anybody, I am an advocate for counseling. And I know in our community in
Mm-hmm.
particular, it's always been taboo, something that we don't talk about, or um, not necessarily embrace the importance of seeking counseling, because there's almost this stigma that's placed, on folks. But it seems like we're moving away from that,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm very happy about. What do you think has been the change in terms of people's just overall perception about seeking out counseling?
Um, and I think that this is something that is more prevalent perhaps in our generation,
Mhm.
kind of where we have realized like we don't have to do it all. Even though we can, even though we are smart enough, we're strong enough, we're equipped enough, but we don't have to.
Mhm.
And so there is very much this superwoman syndrome that has kind of been, permeated throughout our community, throughout our lifetime, that you could just manage it all and keep going. And I think our generation is probably the first generation that's realized, like, nah, this is not where it's at. Like, I need to get the help when I need to get the help. Um, and therapy, of course, is being widely talked about in the media. We see it more on our favorite television shows where our favorite characters are going to therapy. They're doing marital counseling, couples counseling, and individual counseling. And I love it. I'm so glad to see it. I think that social media has also had an effect where you hear more people saying, go to therapy. You hear people saying, you can have therapy in Jesus. You hear people saying like, mind your business, drink your water, and go to therapy. Those great things. And I'm really excited because absolutely, there are more people of our culture and our community that are definitely reaching out and seeking some help.
Now, I know recently, very recently, I think
Mm-hmm.
you spoke at a church, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just curious to know, um, what do you think are some of the ways that we can begin to get our churches, mosques, synagogues, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
more, willing to encourage seeking out counseling, because, you know, and I don't want to make light of
Right.
but in our community, it's like I'm gonna take it to leave it on the altar type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. At least that was certainly with the generation, before us. And like you mentioned, I think you're right. With our generation, we are, more. We realize that there are some things that we just cannot handle, and we need to seek out the help, and it's okay. I think
Absolutely.
important. It's okay to acknowledge, but what do you think that we can do to start to get our religious communities to be more supportive and more open to encouraging their congregation, their members to seek out help as well?
I definitely believe it has to be a top down kind of trickle down effect. And so the fact that the pastor of the church to have this whole Sunday that was about grief support, and that he, talked with his ministerial staff about finding people to come in and talk, I think was a huge thing, because when the leaders acknowledge, like, we can't do this by ourselves, like no one should be grieving alone, like you should have support. If you are not okay, it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to reach out and get help. So I think it definitely has to come from the top. It has to be someone in leadership, brave and bold enough to say, let's try to link these services. Let's link our spiritual support with our emotional and our mental support. Let's normalize the conversation in the community, in our places of worship. Let's normalize that. And so I think when leadership grasps hold of that concept, that it's not a competition. We're not, I'm not saying you can't believe what you believe and still go to therapy. I'm not saying that, and they're not saying that. And so we realize that it's not a competition between our emotional well-being and our spiritual well-being, and that they actually work well when everyone is healthy and a whole human being together. When that works well, I think that it all comes together.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell me, what, as far as grief counseling is concerned, um, I want to know, I guess, how do you know
Mm-hmm.
that you need to seek out help? I mean, are there, and I don't know if maybe that's the right question to ask, but
Mm-hmm.
some people, like I stated, are in tune with themselves. For instance, I knew that I needed to go to grief counseling when my partner passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Just so happened that I was still in counseling when my dad passed away. So as a result, I continue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know people who have also lost, spouses, loved ones, who just have not sought out counseling. And, as a friend, I can suggest, you may want to look into counseling, but do you think that there's a way that if you know someone, you can encourage them to go to counseling or get them? I mean, obviously you can't make them go, but
Right.
do you have any tips or suggestions on what a family member or a friend can do if they know that someone could probably benefit from counseling? Like, would you suggest maybe that they go to a session together, or what do you think?
Uh,
What can we do?
I think that a lot of times, number one, um, therapy doesn't work unless you're ready for it. Like, the therapist can't make you better, you know. And so we need to just talk about the fact that when your life issues start to hamper your daily functioning, then it's time for you to get some help. Like, we know that grief and depression kind of sometimes, is a thin line.
Mhm.
So when your grief is extending so much so into your life that you can't do the things you normally do, we know you're going to be sad. We know you're going to have, the day-to-day struggles and triggers like you talked about earlier. But when you can't get out of the bed every day, or you can't go to work, or you can't take care of your kids, because the grief is that intense, then you probably should be seeking some assistance. Um, and again, when we normalize it and when we take the stigma off of it, it doesn't mean you're crazy. You know, it doesn't mean that you're not strong enough. It doesn't mean that your faith is not strong enough. It just means that everybody should get the help that they need when they need it. So if we are sick in our bodies, if we have diabetes or high blood pressure or a broken leg, broken arm, we're gonna get some help. You know, if you have a cough that persists and won't go away for, weeks on end, you're going to go to the doctor.
Right.
The same with our mental health. And I think we have to just normalize the conversation so it's not a big deal when you go to somebody and say, hey, maybe you should talk about that with a therapist. I think if we all kind of get to the place where it's like, you got a cough, oh, you should go to the doctor. The same way, I think it turns out better for us all.
With your clientele, do you find that you see more women versus men?
I do. And I think that that is primarily because most people, when they're seeking out a therapist, they want somebody that looks like them. And so probably 90% of my clientele are African American women. Just because they wanted someone that looks like them. It's a commonality, and it's also like one less barrier you have to face. Like, you don't want to translate jargon or common terminology when you go in. You just want to be yourself and not worry about what others may be thinking. And again, that's a personal preference. I'm not knocking anybody else, but I do feel like a lot of people are reaching out to find therapists that look like them.
And I'm just curious in terms of the network here. I mean, here in Illinois, how would one go about finding a therapist, particularly one who they identify with? I mean, I know you can go through your insurance company,
Mm-hmm.
but is there a directory of like African American, counselors that folks can be directed to find someone in their area?
Absolutely. So there is a website called Therapy for Black Girls that's specifically for African American women seeking counselors that look like them. And there also is a directory for Therapy for Black Men. And so I always suggest those two directories when you are looking. Of course, there's a general directory called Psychology Today that everybody can go to, but then you have to kind of narrow it down. But those two, Therapy for Black Girls and Therapy for Black Men, you know exactly what you're getting. You can read the profiles, see what insurances or private pay are available, um, and go forward, with someone in your area. Where right now everybody is virtual, so it makes the net even wider that you can pick someone that's available. And so I love to give those two references.
That's awesome because I've heard of therapy for Black girls. Did not realize that there was one for therapy for Black men. So that's good to know. And I've always just kind of done my research, based upon what's in my area.
Right.
That that's good to know. Now, the unfortunate thing I would probably say is that I know a lot of counselors. So of course I'm like, okay, can't go to that person because that's a friend of mine. But
Right.
um, so let's kind of talk about, because in addition to, of course, being a certified counselor, you are also an author. So tell me about
I
this. I
am.
am enough.
Well, kind of a running theme that I was seeing in my practice was women and self-worth issues. So not necessarily self-esteem, how we look on the outside, even though that's, a part of it. Um,
Mhm.
Definitely knowing your worth, knowing what you deserve, not accepting anything less, kind of working through what we call the imposter syndrome, not feeling like you belong in the room, that you should be at the table. And so I kept hearing the same thing, and just was jotting down notes. I started having an I Am Enough conference first. where we kind of had a self-care day. We'd do yoga, we would have conversation, we would have lunch, and it would be a nice workshop for women just to come and just be themselves and kind of talk about those things that we face. And as I continued to do the workshop, you know, taking notes, jotting down themes from the workshops, the book was kind of born out of all of that. So I went back through all my notes, and I had a friend that's a publisher, and she kept pushing and pushing, like, you know, you do this all the time, just write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so we created a format, we got it done, got it published, and I Am Enough was born.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to pick up the book because
Yes, absolutely. It's on my website, it's on Amazon. Go ahead, go for it.
okay, perfect. Because th- when you mention imposter syndrome, that is something that I know for myself working in higher education. I witness, experience it, see it a lot just in talking to some of my colleagues because it's not that many of us anyway, you know,
Mhm.
and there are times where you do feel like, you know, you're not good enough. You know, you are, but there is just something that's embedded, whether it's something that somebody says or what have you, that, you know, makes you feel that way. Um, and even when you're going through different life transitions, for example, you know, you can start to feel that way as well. So I'm sure that if folks get a copy of that book, they'll find some ways to kind of deal with that as well. Do you have any suggestions on what we can do to kind of embrace the fact that we are um, enough? Maybe like positive self affirmations or
Absolutely.
something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think that I talk about it a lot. It's a choice to decide to accept that. Like you have to actually intentionally and purposefully make up your mind that I am enough and I'm going to behave in that manner. And I think when our perspective shifts in that way, it enables us to not accept less. So we're not going to accept less in relationships, going to accept less in our careers, in our educational settings, and even from ourselves, which I think is the key. Like a lot of times, I think that we extend ourselves so much for everyone else, and we don't do the same for ourselves. Like we're so willing to give grace everywhere else, but we're so hard and even sometimes mean, you know, to ourselves. So when you make that kind of paradigm shift that I am enough, flaws and all, where I am right now, you start to be a better friend to yourself first.
Wow. That actually just triggered something for me right there.
So get your book, girl. Get your
I
book.
know I gotta get the book because I was just, you know, what I was actually thinking about when you were talking about that shift and changing your perspective. For some reason, I immediately thought, you know, I have two daughters, and I
Mhm.
thought about my oldest daughter, Aaliyah. And there was, I still remember to this day, she was 5 years old. You know, she's a twin. So her brother is, we got all color spectrums in this household, right? So he's
Mhm.
light with red hair. She's darker complected, you know, with black hair. And I remember one day I was picking them up from school, 5 years old. And someone commented, as people always do whenever we're out, about my son's red hair, right? And how handsome he is and how nice the hair is. And I just, my daughter stopped and she said, "So what? I'm not pretty because I'm dark."
Mm.
5 years old.
Mm.
And there were times where she wouldn't say it, but I could just tell just her disposition, you know, when the two of them were together, people would always comment about him. And I constantly said to her, like, "You are beautiful," you know. And where she ended up making this shift on her own, I began to see sticky notes on her mirror
Mm.
that said, I am intelligent, I am beautiful, I'm this, smile today. And now you can't tell my child a thing because it's almost like, okay, can we bring it down just a little bit?
Right.
But
Tone,
I,
tone it down.
yeah,
Tone it down.
but I love it. But I was just thinking about how she had to make that shift. I could all day long just tell her, no, sweetie, you are more than enough. You are beautiful. You're smart, etc. But she had to change her mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just one example of just something that we probably don't really think about, how different things can impact you from a young age, and how then you can
Yes.
grow, develop into an older person and still have some of these different insecurities as a result of something that may have happened in your childhood.
Mm.
And even for that alone, I mean, I would recommend that folks check in every once in a while for counseling, because you just never know um, why some of the experiences or the challenges that you have as an adult is something that stemmed from your childhood. Now,
Absolutely.
do you see children or adolescents, or do you only work with adults in your practice?
No, I do see children and adolescents. In fact, I used to see them a whole lot more. I think that kind of this quarantine type making going shifting to telehealth kind of makes it a little bit different. Adolescence still is a little bit easier because they're able to talk and kind of process through their feelings. But during this time, I have been definitely recommending younger kids to go directly to someone that specializes in that, just because they have more expertise and the telehealth doesn't kind of translate as well with younger kids,
Mhm.
if you're not special, if that's not your specialty. So yeah, I definitely see adolescents. I actually like adolescents a whole lot, probably because that's I started in child and adolescence, so kind of their um, resistance doesn't bother me. A lot of clinicians have a hard time with teenager behavior. I have teenagers, but even before I had teenagers, it didn't bother me. They're kind of like, I don't want to talk. I don't care what you had to say. It didn't phase me. So I have always been okay with that.
Just thinking about how, when you try to talk to teenagers, it's sometimes like pulling teeth. Um, and yeah. And then, but
Yeah,
when they're ready to talk,
exactly.
then you need to be ready to listen.
Yes.
And
And
I,
the thing is, they don't necessarily always want to talk to their parents. So, a lot of times, especially if a teenager is requesting therapy, get it for them, please. Because when they get to the therapist, they're like, blah, 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 and this and this and this. And so they're really ready, just like an adult is. So yeah, if your teenager ever says like, I really want to talk to somebody, please, please get them the help they want.
do you think that, I've been seeing a lot where there's been protests from like athletes who, and parents who obviously want their children back into sports, even though we're um, doing the e-learning or remote learning. Do you think, as far as the socialization, is
Mhm.
concerned, or lack thereof because of the pandemic, um, what are some signs, I guess, that parents should look for as far as, with their children, um, and how the pandemic may be impacting their children and their mental health?
I would say please keep the door open for conversations. Like, this time more than any other time is the time when we need to be asking our kids, what did you talk about in school? How was your day? How are you feeling? Not just, are you doing okay? Don't go for the one word answers. Go for a conversation where you can really kind of dig into how they are really doing and functioning and kind of maintaining throughout this time. I think it is definitely kind of a watch area that we need to be aware of because they are not seeing their friends every day. You know, of course, they are way more social media active
Mm-hmm.
are. So they are on the different devices. But encourage them to like FaceTime your friends, like video chat, so you can see another person. When it's healthy, when it's safe, maybe encourage some outside kind of social distance, small engagements with their peers so that they still get that interaction. But please definitely talk to them on a day-to-day basis and ask them like, how are you feeling? How is this affecting you? Because this is a huge transition, not just for us, for them too.
Absolutely. Not to keep interjecting my children, but my youngest daughter, who's 13, she said to me the other day, I mean, you've been at home every day since March 13th. And I said, no kidding. You
We
have.
know.
She was like, can you just go back to work or do something? No. But I think it's because our school is here, work is here. So trying to create the boundaries of your home being your home, right? And not
Yes.
allowing work to and school to interfere so much into the household day-to-day activities is probably pretty important, I would imagine. But just creating those boundaries and space. And working from home, for those who are working from home, I'm sure um, has got to be, it could be pretty stressful. I mean, for some, they are probably enjoying it. I don't
Mm.
know. A good thing can only go last for so long, I think.
Right.
But I think it's probably safe to say that creating those boundaries are going to be very critical to maintaining your own mental health as well, because when people were working outside of the home, they had their commute from home. I'm sorry, commute from work to home to kind of decompress,
Yes.
leave work behind. But now you don't really have that, like if you're, and then with everybody online and working remote, that's another
It's a whole thing.
so tell the folks, because I know we didn't say how people would get in contact with you if they would like to seek you out for counseling services.
Mhm.
So if you can share that, that would be great.
Absolutely. So you can always check me out on my website, www.cbittingstherapy.com. Also, social media handles Chantelle Bittings, LCPC on Facebook, and C Bittings Therapy on Instagram. You can go ahead and check in with me there. The book is available. It is I Am Enough. It's 14 Days of Self-Worth, Strength, and Encouragement. It is on Amazon. So go ahead and pick up your book, have it in 2 days. It's a really good, easy read. Each section has a little work for you to do at the end of each section. So you can put your journaling um, hat on and do a little work at the end of each section. And also, I just encourage you that if you don't reach out to me, to make sure that you make a therapist a part of your wellness team. So you have your doctor, your dermatologist, your dentist, put a therapist on your team. Normalize mental health, and make sure that you're well from your mind and your emotions and your body.
Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely have to make sure that the entire body, mind and spirit is all together, right? Um,
Yes.
so I'm actually gonna go and order. I have Amazon Prime, so maybe my book will be here the next day.
Right.
Order my copy, but I would love for you to come back and join me
Absolutely.
again on Light It Up, especially after I have gone through I Am Enough and read through it and done some of the activities. Um, and there are some other things that I definitely think that we can can touch on
Yes.
well in the future. Um, So I really thank you for taking time to join me today on Light It Up. Remember, everyone, you can find Chantelle Bittings. Her website is cbittingstherapy.com.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up I Am Enough on Amazon
Yes.
and also on your website, though, too,
It's
right?
on my website too.
Yeah, so make sure you check her out. And if you're in the Chicagoland area, definitely check her out. Tell a friend. Um, you're absolutely right. We definitely have to normalize mental health. You have to get the entire um, body in check. So,
Yes.
um, anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you joining me today, Chantelle. And I leave all of my guests and listeners in the same way, reminding them to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Join me next week on Light It Up. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle at Light It Up Podcasts. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.